Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are on Duskwatch Plateau playing as the Brettonians against the Greenskins. And so you may be wondering what exactly I was thinking here. Either way, the main reason I wanted to do this matchup actually, and when I saw my opponent had brought Greenskins, I really just hopped on the opportunity to bring Brettonia, is because I've actually had several matchups playing as the Greenskins where my opponent switched to Brettonia. And it almost seemed like they wanted to counterpick. Several of the matches I've casted on stream, or several matches I've casted on YouTube, some of which I've casted on stream. So I'm sure you guys have seen, or some of you guys at least have seen. Some of my matches that I haven't casted that just weren't that good. But either way, I always see people pick Brettonia as a counter to Greenskins. And I always wonder, what the heck are you thinking? I don't actually think that could have a counter to Greenskins. I think it's actually a kind of weaker matchup for Brettonia in some ways. It's one where they struggle a good bit. So I wanted to try it out from the Brettonian perspective and see what happens. And regardless, this is what I decided to come up with. For my lord, I decided to bring the Fey Enchantress. She's pretty similarly kitted out to what you usually see. The only difference is I actually brought Flesh to Stone. My theory being that if my opponent decided to go very heavy on, say, Savage Orc Big Guns or not Boar Boy Big Guns, but Savage Orc Big Guns or Big Guns, this could actually be incredibly helpful. Plus 60 armor is especially if you overcast it, you get double your duration. So a minute and a half, almost, of plus 60 armor. That's a monstrous buff. That takes, especially say Questing Knights, which is what I had intended to cast it on if I need to fight in a prolonged combat. That takes them up from 80 to 140 armor. For those of you who don't know how the armor system works, because armor works from 50% to 100% of its value, you get your ranges from 70 to 140. How much non-AP damage you're blocking, and that means that over half the time, 4 out of 7 hits, you're blocking all of the damage, all of the non-AP damage coming out of a big gun. So that was really my logic behind it. I figured, this could make these guys really pretty sustainable, maybe more so than say physical resistance or from regrowth. Definitely much cheaper, and Earthblood, which can be a little situational sometimes. Regardless, for my army, it is very cheap on the infantry. This is a common trend, I'm sure you guys at this point are used to. Single unit of Holy Wardens in the center, anchoring things, and in case my opponent brought Savages, these guys should trade well. 2 men-at-arms with shields to soak up arrows and protect the flanks. 2 Spear men-at-arms. These guys will also protect against Orc cavalry pretty well, and that's why all my main cavalry force actually goes to deal with my opponent's main threats. Then, of course, the usual Fey Enchantress, Krell Guardian duo here in the middle. And, of course, like I said, the Fey Enchantress, basically standard equipment with her usual Favor of the Fey, Chalice of Potions, Regrowth, Earthblood, and Flesh to Stone for once. For the rest of the army, on the flanks, Companions of Quentinus and Grail Knights on one end, normal Questing Knights and Grail Knights on the other. So the idea being that I've got 2 units with high AP to deal with Black Orcs, because Black Orcs are a crazy threat to Brettonia. Even Grail Knights on full charge will actually struggle a good bit to deal with them. So if you look at the weapon strength here, it's 36 armor piercing, which is absolutely beastly. Even if we look at, I think, Black Orcs, it's got to be comparable to Black Orcs, I think. It might be even, it's literally the same AP values as Black Orcs. So really solid there. Of course, with their charge, they can get in. They've got better melee stats than Black Orcs. And yeah, I was kind of hoping they'd help me hold the line in the center, or hold the line against the Black Orcs, more so than the infantry, which would get dumpstered, especially say foot squires. Regardless, my opponent did decide to go with a fairly conventional composition, definitely a little overly heavy on monsters, I think, or not on monsters, on a heavy cav. You can see he does have 3 Orc Boar Boy Big Guns. Personally, I don't think these guys are a good pick against the Brettonians. Nasty Skulkers or Big Guns, I think, are a better choice. You might be wondering why I wouldn't bring more than, say, 1 or 2. It's because these guys actually trade pretty god-awful with Brettonian cav. While they do have that bonus versus large, their armor is so bad that they tend to melt pretty quickly. And they don't do well against shooting, none of that stuff. For his front line, my opponent has some Black Orcs, some Goblins, 3 units of each, or actually just 2 units of Goblins, and then some Orc Big Guns on the periphery to provide some extra anti-large. So a lot of anti-large makes sense. A Goblin Big Boss mounted on, actually not mounted, well, on foot, with Slippery. A second Goblin Big Boss over here on foot, and a unit Force Goblin Spider Eyes to provide poison. And of course, up in the sky, we have Azag the Slaughterer, floating around with actually all of his spells, Foe Seeker, and Wah. Once again, something I would not really recommend. He also has to get on with it. So usually you just want spells you really think will be good for you. Regardless, I do think my opponent might have been a little new here. That that was kind of my opinion, but regardless, I'm deciding to sort of push forward, try to force them to make a move, and you can see my archers, these fine peasant bowmen, because you know these guys are amazing, are going to start chipping away at my opponent's units. And you can see I'm going to start focusing on this unit of orc big guns and the boar boys. I don't really want to be wasting my time on black orcs. I'm not going to do enough damage to justify them. Regardless, my opponent, perhaps not enjoying the fact that he's taking a lot of fire, perhaps getting a little nervous, charges. He actually pops his wall a little prematurely, in my opinion. You can see Azag actually does dive into these spearmen, and I immediately kind of move my cavalry around to this point, and you can see I'm going to start countercharging. You can see the companions of Quentinus piling in from the flank. Here in the center, archers are just unloading. You can see these questing knights are actually going to pile straight into the middle to help deal with the black orcs. And this is not going to be a great fight for them. They will get dumpstered in actually not even that long of a run, because especially with their buffs, black orcs just hit like trucks, but they will help hold the line here with the battle pilgrims. Over here on the periphery, you can see I'm going to start winning this fight pretty decisively. The orc boar against Shatter and the two orc biggins there are not having a good time at all. Over here, a Chalice of Potions is going down on this mob of black orcs. There are probably some questing knights that'll get splashed a little bit, but you know, it's okay. Sacrifice has got to be made. And my opponent takes a huge beating there. You can see those black orcs getting sent flying. The questing knights, you know, get damaged a bit, but it's okay. Here in the heart of things, you can see Earthblood has gone down. My spears are actually trashing the orc boar by big guns. This is a big problem for orcs. Their cavalry, essentially their cavalry only works against enemy cavalry. Not even that well. Specifically their boar cavalry and their anti-large boar cavalry. All the other boar cavalry is still trash, but the orc boar by big guns, they only work against cavalry. And even there, they don't work that well. And you can see here they're getting mauled by spearmen at arms, essentially. My Grailguard knights kind of are sitting around doing nothing almost. They do jab a few orcs here and there. Regardless, my opponent's cavalry contingent at this point has basically fallen apart. You can see they're not able to fight through their way through. Grail Guardians, Fan Enchantress here doing whatever she wants. Goblins here are oversaturating the black orcs, making the black orcs a lot less effective. It's definitely a big benefit for me. And my opponent actually casted a Fate of Buna, I think, and a Doom and Darkness on my peasant bows. So big waste of mana there, and big win for me. Regardless, you can see the Grail Guardians jumping on Azag. He's trying to shut down that backline support, making a lot of sense there. Here I actually miscast. I had Flesh to Stone on my Grail Knights. So you can see they're up to 150 armor, which would make them absolutely monsters, but completely wasted. I really wanted on the Questing Knights. We're staying in the fight. Regardless, you can see they are chasing Azag, making him run like heck. He's not able to escape all that well, and they're hitting very hard, actually. They've got solid weapon strength and 100 charge bonus. I'm keeping him in lance formation right now. They're doing pretty well. As for the rest of my army, you can see the questing knights completely routed. They're on 8 miles. They're in a terrible situation. But the companions are holding. They're doing well. And the black orcs here are taking way too long to shoot through the holy wardens. I actually hit them with their growth. You might think this is dumb. I figure 22% physical resist as well as the heals will help them hold just that little bit longer, buy me a little bit of extra time. In this situation, I just want that little bit of extra time so I can wipe up these pockets and get rid of some annoying orcs on the periphery here. You can see we're collapsing in on the flank. The orc boar big guns here are failing. Questing knights are winning out. Now, this was a big mistake on my part. I should have pulled them out and cycle charged. Once again, hindsight 2020. I really wish I'd hit these guys with Flesh to Stone, but I didn't, and paid for it. Regardless, my peasant bows are going to start shooting at Azag. Normally these guys are really inaccurate, and they still are, but at this range they're going to be able to hit him pretty consistently, and you can see he's definitely getting dumpstered pretty hard. You can see he's losing hundreds of HP and getting completely torn apart. And this front line is going to buckle. You can see the Grail Knights here trying to shoot the gap, get maybe a hit or two in on Azag before he takes the skies, but even if they don't, it doesn't matter. I then simply shift targets to orc big guns, start routing them, and although my opponent finally did buckle my center, it's too little too late. You can see the Grail Guardians here holding the black orcs down. The Spearmen at Arms helping hold the line. The Fan Enchantress in there sapping away these guys' life. They're buffing the Black Orcs, dropping their melee defense a whole bunch. At this point, my opponent's essentially just down to 2 Black Orcs, and while I do hit these Grail Knights with Favor of the Fae, and I just have too much cavalry at this point, really, for my opponent to deal with. He just doesn't have the tools anymore. Goblin Big Bosses aren't going to win the day for him or anything like that. So to be fair, my opponent, as far as I could tell, was a new player, and it's a little difficult sometimes to draw conclusions from that. I hope this wasn't too discouraging of an experience. But I did kind of want to see how the Brettonia could perform against orcs, and I do think the Brettonia has some pretty solid counters. You can see the Questing Knights racked up a pretty good kill count against black orcs, and to an extent goblins. You can see the Companions of Quentinus did a great job against big guns. 82 kills, not bad at all. They still had about half the unit left. Obviously, they were getting buffs, but really, I kind of misclicked with that Flesh to Stone. I think it would have been a huge difference maker there on that flank, and I clicked on Grail Knights instead. So it happens. Regardless, I don't think it's that bad of a matchup against Brettonia. You definitely need to bring AP. Even if you don't worry about, say, Black Orcs, even if you say, okay, I can cycle charge Black Orcs to death with Grey Knights. What my opponent didn't bring here, and actually I didn't notice that. I didn't realize one of those was Savage Orc Poor Boys. That makes it even worse. But regardless, one of the things I would be worried about with Grey Knights is spiders. This was actually brought up by one of the viewers in my last stream, that why didn't I pick a spider, or that I could have brought a spider, and I actually completely forgot about it. I've actually brought a spider quite a few times against Brettonia, usually the queen, but sometimes I just bring a normal Ragnarok. And they actually do really well against Brettonia, because Brettonia doesn't have too many tools to deal with them. And that was a good catch from my viewer last time, and that was something I was really worried about. And you really need solutions, and I think here with the Questing Knights, they can definitely take on a Ragnarok. Especially if you hit them with like a Favor of the Fae, or you heal them a little bit, and they'll do well. The Ragnarok doesn't dish out that much hurt, it's just stupidly tanky and annoying. As for the rest of the build, you get a front line that can kind of hold. The Grail Knights do a great job just killing things quickly, especially the squishier peripheral stuff. This was a pretty bad map for cavalry, honestly, but in my opinion, you really need to make cavalry work as Brettonia. If your cavalry doesn't work, you are probably going to lose the game. You can do infantry heavy builds. I've obviously seen it. It used to be almost a meta back in the day. It was annoying Brettonian man spam, but even now, you can pull it off. But I think that really cavalry is the way to go with Brettonia. If you want a consistently competitive build, you go with heavy cav, and so you got to make it work. So even if it's a bad map, you got to try to make things work. So definitely my micro wasn't the best. It wasn't on point, but in all areas. But I do think that this sort of composition can work. You get some arrow fire, deal with low armor stuff. You get some front line to hold, and you get some decent anti-large against squishy large units, and against squishy infantry like Savage Orc Big Guns or just Orc Big Guns. And then you have your AP Nutcrackers with your Questing Knights. So it's a really solid combo. For my opponent's build, like I mentioned before, I do think he was a bit of a new player. So I don't mean this to be like harsh or berating here or be gloating here or any. I hope it wasn't too discouraging. As for the comp though, even if you don't have the I think he probably doesn't have the DLC just by kind of the composition here. Don't bring a bunch of spells on Azag. Azag's not a terrible pick, honestly. I'd bring Wurtzag. I think he's better. You get the Voodoo Doll, and you get a bunch of stat buffs, which I think makes him a better choice. But Azag's not terrible. You can bring Fate of Buna, but definitely don't bring the charge bonus. It's a total waste. It's a total scam. If you're gonna bring spells, basically just bring whatever you specifically want. So I would suggest Fate of Buna and Spirit Leech. Maybe Doom and Darkness to get a Terror Bomb, if you were looking to do that to Brettonian infantry, which is doable. I'm not saying it isn't, but that's definitely pretty potent. For the rest of it, I don't think Goblin Big Bosses are worth it. I don't really think you need. Maybe a Goblin Shaman is decent for the debuffs, but otherwise I wouldn't really bring other support heroes. And then for infantry, even if you don't have access to Nasty Sculptures because you don't have the DLC, I would focus largely on Black Orcs, and then probably bring I think Savage Orc Big Guns and a Ragnarok. Honestly, I just drop these Orc Big Guns. Try to get some archers in here. Get a handful of Wolf Riders. Get a unit or two of archers, and try to bring some Big Guns to cover your peripheries. And probably Savage Orc Big Guns. Despite the fact that Brettonia has a lot of magic, I do think that the extra mobility on Savage Orc Big Guns, as well as their superior melee offense stats, can be a difference maker when you're forced to deal with units like Grail Guardians or Grail Knights. I think it can be a game changer there. So, regardless, a good game to my opponent, D. Thomas here. Hope to see you again on the ladder. I hope you guys just found this fun to watch, and hopefully got some ideas for what a decent Brettonian build against the Greenskins will be, or could be. It's just odd that I see it as a common matchup as Greenskins. I figured, it'll be fun to test out from the Brettonian side. So regardless, a good game. I do hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe below. If you have any comments, any criticisms, any questions, as usual, don't hesitate to ask or comment. I love to hear what you guys think. I'd love to hear your guys' opinions, so be sure to share. And yeah, as usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Over and out.